Excuse me. Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy day to join us for this session. Excuse me. This is a standard disclaimer used by, per FTA policy. Excuse me. As you can see, it's basically just saying that this document's intended to provide clarity to the public regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies. The goal of today's session is to familiarize NTD reporters with the safety and security reporting requirements and the individual reporting forms. As always, we hope that the knowledge you gain today will make your job easier, and we sincerely appreciate your commitment to safety and security reporting. For those of you that report purchase transportation operations, identified in the system as PT operations, please share this presentation with them so that they too are aware of what you are required to report to NTD. You may also find it helpful to share this presentation with other departments that provide data to you, again, so that they're aware of your reporting requirements. So today we're going to show you how to access the NTD system and navigate through the various menus and forms. We'll discuss how setup is achieved and reviews the safety package navigation. And then we're going to go through each of the four safety collision forms and how to complete a typical collision. As Lori mentioned, James and I are the presenters today. Other key contacts for questions are Chelsea Champlin, the NTD Program Manager, and Joe Eldridge, our NTD Operations Center Manager. We'll present this contact information again at the end of the presentation in case you don't have time to jot it down now if you're interested. As Lori mentioned, also very important, instead of using the chat box, please use the Q&A box for questions, and if possible, if you're referencing a particular slide, please include that slide number in case we have an opportunity to refer back to it. All right, so let's get started with our first session. In 1974, Congress established the National Transit Database Program as a means to collect information and statistics on transit systems in the U.S. The first data was collected in 1979, by Safe Paper Reports. Since then, the NTD has evolved into the nation's primary source of information and statistics on transit systems. The data you report is used in a variety of ways. These include, but are not limited to, publicly available data products, which can be used for peer review, for example, the formulation of national policy, and is used to factor federal funding allocations to transit agencies. How do we validate your data? SNS 40 forms are read by the analyst to compare the event description against data points. In addition, all the forms are periodically run through various system validation programs looking for common issues. If the analyst has questions or requests corrections, the analyst typically returns the form to the agency, but may also call you or email you. Once corrections are made, the validation analyst reviews the forms again and will approve them, hopefully approve them. When you do make your changes, please be sure to submit your reports. Failure to report can have severe consequences and could affect the agency's annual program funding from FTA. A failure to report can be submitted by an analyst to FTA for a variety of reasons, such as you see listed here. Please remember to submit all your reports in a timely fashion. This is a screenshot of the National Transit Database homepage on the FTA website. On the left are several links identified by blue arrows that we're going to be discussing in the next few slides. The first of these links is the one that says About the NTD. This section contains an overview of the NTD program and contact information for technical and non-technical help. The NTD data section provides access to published data products, including safety and security time series files, which is an excellent source for reviewing your agency's statistics and for peer comparison to other NTD reporting agencies. Also, located here is the safety and security frequently asked questions. You will also find current and annual data profiles, monthly ridership statistics, and the National Transit Summary and Trends document. Under the reference material, you'll find the NTD glossary, various policy manuals, quick reference guides, and information on training conferences and more. You would click on the reporting login, then click on the NTD reporting tool to log into the NTD program. If you are a new user to NTD, you will first need to register with login.gov. A link will be provided, or you can just go to the FTA website and search for login.gov. For your NTD login, your business email address will be your login, and you will create a password. Users can change the password as often as they like, but the system requires a change every 60 days. If a user has not been in the system for 60 days, the system will lock the user ID. If you do get locked out, you may try to gain access by clicking on the reset password link located beneath where you log in, or you can try and gain access through using an unlock request from the actions menu. So this would be letting you in, but not necessarily letting you into safety and security. Or, of course, you can always call the NTD help desk or your analyst for assistance. The agency's user manager establishes a person's user role in the system. The user manager is also the point of contact if you need to have your user role changed. A person must be uniquely identified in only one role. There are several access levels for NTD reporting safety and security data as shown here in this list. It's very important to contact your, excuse me, let me get a sip of water. To contact your safety analyst whenever there is a change in reporter. This way, we can be sure to contact the new person and ensure they've received training and update our external contact lists. All right, so what we're going to do in the interest of time, we're going to skip about the next 11 pages or so here. Again, this is a very full report, and we want to make sure we get through all of the forms. So this navigation section, and you've got the download, so you can always review those pages. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip over to our clarifications page on page 26, or slide 26 rather. Okay. All right. So for 2025, FTA has made a few clarifications. The first pertains to reporting homicides. This does not change the collection of fatalities. The clarification helps identify the type of situation that resulted in the homicide. The second bullet point distinguishes that while agencies and or law enforcement may assign lesser offenses, the event should be reported as a homicide in NTD if the killing is willful or intentional. Another clarification pertains to assaults with robberies. FTA has clarified that where a person is assaulted and robbed by force or violence, or by putting the victim in fear of immediate harm, are to be reported, when these happen concurrently, are to be reported as a robbery and not as an assault. There are two form changes shown here. The SNS 20 CEO certification form has been adjusted so that if reports are not in the proper status, it will not allow the CEO to submit. We'll talk about more of this when we get into the SNS 20 section. On the SNS 50 form, additional guidance has been added for each of the reporting categories and also includes the thresholds for that category. For the number of safety occurrences section, we added a please describe box for when users report other injuries for locations that are in vehicle or in revenue facilities. A similar description box has been added when an other injury is reported under the location name called other injuries, and once again, other is selected to describe who this other person is. On the SNS 40 forms, you may have already noticed this change. It actually took place a few months ago in 2024. one of the rail alignments was changed the way it read. So it used to read, shared with other rail vehicles, controlled access to other non-rail vehicles, which we found some people felt was confusing or unclear. So we actually changed it to read what the definition of that term was, which is a semi-exclusive right-of-way with controlled grade crossings for vehicular or pedestrian traffic. All right, so that concludes our clarifications, and we're going to start taking a look at the SNS 20 form. The SNS 20 CEO certification form is the CEO's confirmation of the accuracy of the safety and security data reported for the previous calendar year. The form becomes available February 1st in the previous year's safety package. The form automatically calculates from all of the submitted reports for the year. Unsubmitted data is not included. The form is due by the end of February, again, of the following year, and only a person logged in as either the CEO or the CEO delegate can submit the form. Late notices are sent to the CEO. If this form has not been submitted for calendar year 2024, please remind your CEO to submit this form as quickly as possible, as they are past due. Data reporters should review their data to ensure it matches the data in the SNS 20. Agencies can use any in-house reports that are available to help verify the data, or one may use the historical lookup report on the Reports tab in NTD, which also may help with your verifying your incident counts. If the data does not match, you want to check to make sure that all the safety data reports are submitted. Again, unsubmitted data that shows an open status there would not be included in your CEO certification. You may add or delete SNS 40 or SNS 50 data, and the SNS 20 will automatically recalculate the numbers the next time you go to open the form. So on that box, and you'll see it in just a second, there's an option to confirm the data, and then the CEO would be able to click on Submit. When the CEO tries to submit the button, the CEO may notice that the Submit button is not available. Again, this is where our new validation check will come into place. A pop-up message may appear letting the CEO know that one or more forms are not in the proper status. No form may show open or returned, and the SNS 30 and 40 forms must be in approved status. So this is a screenshot of the SNS 20 form, and this the information across the top, just to let you know, this is from our test site. We use this so that it doesn't actually show any names of reporters and reporter telephone numbers and so forth. So, but this is what the actual form looks like. And here you actually see that disclaimer at the bottom that says that there are reports in an improper status. And the submit button, again, as noticed, is grayed out. So you'd have to close this and then make sure and go back and see what the status is of your forms in the Appian program. And that's pretty much it for the CEO certification. So let's go on to looking at our SNS 30s, our security configuration forms. The security configuration form collects the number and type of security personnel employed or contracted by your agency. The form is completed once at the beginning of the calendar year and is due by the end of February to coincide with when your January data is due. You are not required to update this form during the year. All SNS 30s must be completed and submitted in order to enable reporting. If you cannot edit or create an SNS 40 or 50, it's because one or more 30s are open. And again, all forms should be completed by the end of February. So you can see that this is for a bus mode, but the forms are the same regardless of mode. Those of you that have completed SNS 30s recently will notice that you have the usual box to enter the number of primary security personnel and the box to enter the number of secondary personnel. The total number of personnel is automatically calculates from the figures in the primary and secondary boxes. Below that are the 7 selections for identifying your primary and secondary personnel types. The primary security force is one that routinely responds to events and/or is assigned to patrol agency property. The secondary security force or forces is the personnel that occasionally responds or responds when the primary security force requires assistance. If you use local police non-contracted, please use a count of 0. The number of personnel is reported in full-time equivalent hours. Therefore, one full-time equivalent, FTE, equals one person working a 40-hour week or 2,080 hours per year. Please prorate the number of personnel if the person works only part-time, providing transit security, or they provide security for more than one mode. One SNS 30 is completed for each mode and type of service. Be careful not to double count personnel. The value in the total number of security personnel from each of the SNS 30 forms that you complete should equal the total number of personnel the agency employs or contracts with. For example, if you operate demand response in bus purchase transportation and LRDO, it may be allocated as 0.5 for your demand response, more allocated to your bus mode at 1.5, and perhaps even more than that for your light rail at 3.0. So the analyst is going to add all 3 of these numbers together and confirm that you have 5 FTE, in this case, 5 full-time equivalents. If your security force covers multiple modes, you may use any reasonable method for determining FTEs. That may be modal ridership or the number of employees covering a mode. If an agency contracts for security and pays a monthly fee based on services used, they should determine FTE based on the previous year's total hours worked. NTD allows for only one primary personnel type. If your agency has more than one type of security personnel it considers primary, report the secondary force with the largest number, report the security force with the largest number of personnel as the primary and the smaller force as the secondary. For further information on completing the SNS 30 form, please refer to the policy manual on the NTD website, or of course, you can ask your safety analyst for assistance. All right, so now we're going to take a look at reporting our non-major data on the SNS 50 form. All right, so first we're going to take a look at the definition of a reportable event, which, as you can see here, is a safety or security event occurring on the transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a transit maintenance facility, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle that meets the non-major thresholds. There are 3 types of incidents that are captured on the SNS 50 form. First is the assault on a transit worker, then the other safety events section, and the fire section, not necessarily in that order based on your mode. And then now we're going to take a look at each one of these in further detail. As we continue with our reportability and applicability, there are some exclusions to the non-major events. First, events that occur off transit property where persons or objects come to rest on transit property after the event are excluded. Also, OSHA events occurring in administrative buildings are excluded. Transport of an individual solely for mental health evaluation unrelated to a specific event, for declarations of self-harm, where there's no evident injury, individuals transported solely for intoxication, drug overdose, or exposure to the elements, and finally, injuries from collisions even those collisions that you might consider minor collisions, or any other events that meet a major threshold. Just really quickly in summary to make that point, no collision data would ever get reported on the SNS 50 form. And lastly, the exclusion of events occurring during the engineering or construction phase of a new rail transit system or the extension of an existing rail transit system are not reportable unless they involve a transit-related activity such as operations, testing, simulated service or pre-revenue service, or a transit-related maintenance activity. As a reminder, since it is a little bit new since 2023, commuter rail modes do now, and certain hybrid roles that used to be exempt, do now report on the SNS 50 form, but of course they report only non-major assaults because they only report security data. All right, so the non-major data collection includes a monthly count of assaults on transit workers where the transit worker was not injured, meaning they were not transported away from the scene for medical attention. Any assault that results in an injury will continue to be reported on the SNS 40 major event form. The other safety incidents section must meet the single injury only threshold and are related to slips, trips, falls, electric shock, etc. If the safety event results in multiple injuries or a serious injury, then the event is bumped up to an SNS 40 major event. The SNS 40 form also collects the number of non-major fires where there was no evacuation, no injuries, no fatalities, no property damage, but the fire still required suppression. This table serves as a recap of the 2023 change in the definition of a transit worker. This definition was made specifically to include volunteers as workers. Excuse me. The next row provides the definition of an assault on a transit worker. As you can see, it is a circumstance in which the individual knowingly or without lawful authority or permission, and the intent to endanger the safety of any individual or with reckless disregard for the safety of human life, interferes with, disables, incapacitates a transit worker while the transit worker is performing the duties of the transit worker. FTA is not tasked to determine if your reports are reportable. Note the thresholds here in bold. This is the threshold for reporting an assault on a transit worker. So we just kind of highlighted those to delineate them from the rest of the text in the definition. So there must be intent to endanger the safety of an individual or with reckless disregard for the safety of human life. Use those thresholds to determine if there's a reportable event. Again, the onus is on the agency to determine that thresholds are met. In the non-major transit worker assault section, you will record the number of no injury worker assaults that occurred during the reporting month. You'll report the event by location and the type of worker that was assaulted. As you can see, there are two types of workers, operators and other transit workers. These definitions may also be found on the NTD glossary. There are two terms used to collect the assault type. These terms classify the assault as either physical or non-physical. In a physical assault, the assailant makes the physical contact with the worker by body, by an object, a weapon, or any projectile. Projectiles may include bullets, liquids, saliva, or any other substance. In non-physical assaults, there's no physical contact with the worker. Non-physical assaults could be verbal threats, harassment, interference with the worker's duties. For example, interference with the operator's inability to continue service by refusing to get off the vehicle when asked. But of course, again, keep in mind, you still need those thresholds met so that there is an intent to endanger the operator in that situation. There is an additional details box that's available. This box is optional, so you're not required to enter any data into that box. However, you may choose to include information about an assault. The description is not required again, but may be helpful, for example, for identifying risk factors or other pertinent information such as CCTV in the area, if operator safety barriers are in place, and so on. If you do complete the box, please enter concise, to-the-point narratives to include the person and assault type and the reportability so that we may validate the text against the entries that you've put in. All right, so here's a couple of scenarios. In the first scenario, a passenger refuses to exit the bus, and so the doors can't close, and this prompts the operator to leave her seat and approach the passenger. This interferes with the operator's duty to drive the vehicle. And you can see here, included in that content, is that this was a physical assault. Passenger spit on the operator. In the second scenario, a train cleaner is yelled at and cursed at and threatened due to accidentally touching the passenger. She does not seek medical attention, and the cleaner is not transported for medical attention. On the form, enter the number of safety occurrences. I'm sorry, we're moving on to the safety section. I apologize. So in the safety incident section, excuse me, you would enter in the number of safety occurrences for the month and the matching number of injured parties. Again, remember, this is a one-to-one relationship here, so every occurrence would have to have one single injury. Again, remember that injured means that the person was transported away from the scene for medical attention, regardless of whether they appear to be injured or not. Do not include people who were not transported away from the scene for medical attention. Reported injuries are captured in 3 categories as shown. We would not expect to see other injuries reported for any of the in-vehicle option locations or the non-revenue facility options. For these two locations, and the catch-all locations, further explanation as required, as we touched on in the clarifications on the forms. As I mentioned, when you report on other category injuries, the new description box will appear at the bottom of the selection for you to explain who this other person is. Okay, so here are several examples of injuries reported on the SNS 50 in the safety section. A passenger thrown out of their seat due to a vehicular maneuver, a train door closing on an arm, leg, backpack, or similar type situation, a person falling down an escalator in a transit facility, or a person who walks into the side of a stopped train. If the train is moving, then that would be reported as a collision. Again, the last thing is non-major fires, and this section captures fires that require suppression, but the event does not meet any major event threshold. 2 of the categories on the SNS 50 form in the safety incidents section refer to securement issues. Securement issues are those that are related to an injury resulting from improper securement of the mobility device, such as a wheelchair or a scooter. They would be reported under other in-vehicle securement issue. The other category is other in-vehicle, not a securement issue. So these are those slips, trips, and falls type situations that we mentioned a little bit earlier, or perhaps someone thrown from a seat during a hard brake or other vehicle maneuver. So this is a sample of the SNS 50 form. Again, not necessarily in this order. On your form, it's going to depend on the mode that you see, but this is just a screenshot of a portion of the form. Here's the extra text we've added in, and we've also, for each section, added in the thresholds for reporting in that section to be extra helpful. And this is the other half of the form. And in the no non-major assaults to report box, which actually I didn't point out to you, well, you can, let's see, go back one just so you can see it quickly. All right, so right here, there's no non-major assaults to report. There's a no non-major section for each. Same with the fires you see down here, and then there's one for the safety section as well. But when you choose this one, the no non-major assaults, you're confirming that you have no major assaults to report for the month. When you click on that, then at the bottom of the screen in the little grade box here, you see a warning message is going to come up to indicate that, by checking this, you're confirming, in short, that a failure to submit a completed and timely SNS 50 form may be considered a failure to report as defined by the title you see listed here. So you must click on OK to continue to submitting your form. All right, and you must complete your SNS 50 form for each mode and type of service each month. If no qualifying safety events or other events occurred in the month, you open the appropriate form and click on the one of or all of the no data to report boxes I just pointed out, and then you click on Save and Submit. The SNS 50 is completed regardless of any major event for the month. The NTD system automatically sends late notices on the 1st, 5th, and 15th of the following month after your data is due. Please note that a report that has been saved but not submitted is considered late. If you get a late notice, please check to ensure all of your reports are submitted and not just saved. Subsequent late notices are sent by the analyst. If there are extenuating circumstances why you cannot report, please advise your safety analyst. If you are not receiving late notices and your user role is the safety contact, please ask your agency's safety contact to, if your user role is not the safety contact, I apologize. Please ask your safety contact, whomever is delegated as the safety contact, to forward those late notices on to you. And you can look this up in the profile, which is available on the home screen. Okay, so one last page with reference to these SNS 30s and 50 forms that we've just discussed. The forms can be modified at any time. Some reporters like to enter events as they occur each month. For these reporters, they can modify the form, save it, and close it after each change. Please note that if you need to make a change to an SNS 50 form, when you open the form and make the change, you want to click on Submit in the same session, not the Save button. If someone else is making edits after you, some agencies do have multiple reporters that report on the SNS 50 form. You may have to make a temporary change or other workarounds, such as putting something in the comment box in order to reactivate the Submit button. And of course, if you have questions about that, please contact your analyst. Again, each of your validation analysts reviews the reports, and if we have any questions or concerns, we'll return the report to you. It will be returned to the person listed as the last modified user on the form, the section of the forms that you use all the time. And so if it's not coming back to you again, that person may need to forward this on to someone else if there's someone submitting things after you do. All right, so we've gone over all of our 30s and 50s, and so I'm now going to turn this over to James to take us into the next section.
Great, thank you, Anne. Now we are going to discuss major event reporting. Applicability is the same as for the SNS 50, but let's look at this in more detail. A reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a maintenance facility or yard, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle and meets a reporting threshold. SNS 40 reports are due no later than 30 days from the date of the event. Please make every effort to report in a timely manner. The exclusions have not changed and are similar to those discussed in the SNS 50 section. They include events that occur off transit property where persons, vehicles, or objects come to rest on transit property after the event. OSHA events in admin buildings, deaths as a result of illness, drug overdose, or natural causes, including those found deceased in maintenance vehicle or other non-revenue vehicle collisions that occur while traveling to or from a related maintenance work, or collisions involving a supervisor or transit police vehicle while operating on public roads. We just mentioned this is the last we just mentioned this in the last SNS 50 section, but the exclusion for the engineering or construction phase of events applies to major events as well. Each threshold is independent, so any event meeting the reportable event criteria and meeting any one of these thresholds is automatically reportable. A fatality, including suicides, one or more persons transported for medical attention or a serious injury, substantial property damage, evacuations of a transit facility or vehicle for life safety reasons, or evacuations to the rail right-of-way, including both transit or official directed customer self-evacuations, are all automatically reportable, regardless of any other threshold. All derailments, both on the main line or in the yard. Continuing with reporting applicability, the following events are automatically reportable. A collision involving a rail transit vehicle at a grade crossing or intersection. A collision between a rail transit vehicle and a person, regardless of injury. A collision between a transit rail vehicle and another transit rail vehicle, which includes both revenue or non-revenue and maintenance vehicles. Any incidents involving a runaway train, which applies only to revenue vehicles, regardless of whether they are in service or not. One example of a reportable collision is a deadheading or an out-of-service vehicle is involved in a collision meeting a reportable threshold. It is reportable. Maintenance-related activities are included in reporting. Here you see a few examples of maintenance-related activities that are reportable. 2 rail workers are injured in a manhole while providing maintenance on rail infrastructure below street level. A maintenance employee is hit by a vehicle in the yard and is injured. Or a track worker suffers a fatal fall onto the tracks. Less severe injuries to maintenance workers are captured on the SNS 50 monthly summary report, along with the non-major injuries to passengers and patrons. Here are a few types of events that are not reportable. The first two listed are examples of events that occur off transit property. Next are employees injured on a city street or other property that is not transit-owned property, and they were performing a maintenance activity. Lastly, ceiling panels fall down in a transit station, nearly missing a patron who was startled but not injured. Near misses are not reportable. NTD also collects non-transit collisions, such as an accident in a transit parking lot or with transit property. Here you see 2 examples. Another example of a reportable non-transit collision would be if rail maintenance equipment collided with anything other than a train and the event meets a threshold. Now we will look at each threshold in more detail. A fatality is a death confirmed within 30 days of a transit-related event. This includes transit-related suicides. Please do not include deaths resulting from illness, drug overdoses, or natural causes, including those found deceased on transit property where it is not a result of a collision or a suicide. There are 2 types of injuries. An injured person is a person transported immediately away from the scene for medical attention, which is considered a non-serious injury. This includes transport by ambulance, transport by private vehicle, or any other types of transport. An injury may be deemed as a serious injury, which does not require transport from the scene. Whenever you report a serious injury, please describe the nature of the injury in the event description to corroborate the serious nature you reported. Someone knocked unconscious would meet the serious threshold as it affects the brain. Please note that a 48-hour hold for mental health evaluation does not meet the serious injury criteria. Serious injuries are defined by the following criteria. Requires hospitalization for more than 48 hours, commencing within 7 days of the day.
James, we're not hearing you anymore. I'm not hearing you. I don't know if it's my,
I did not hear him either. I was just looking to see if it was my computer.
yeah, that was my first thought was what happened to my computer because I had a disaster yesterday.
I can pick up for James until,
Okay.
let's see. Oh,
Whoops. Okay.
oh,
Sorry,
did-
everyone.
Did he unshare that?
Apparently the day I'm having is extending to other people now.
Okay.
I'm cursing
Let me
everyone.
just share my screen until he gets back up.
Sorry about
Okay.
this. It's
Okay.
technology. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Okay, my DOT system went out completely this morning. So, okay, I think we were on injury. Is that where we were? I believe.
70, I think 70 looks right.
Okay, all right. So I think James had already said that serious injury did not require transport from the scene, knocked unconscious, and a 48-hour hold. So I think we're on the next page. Okay. All right. So serious injuries are defined by the following criteria, as you see listed here. So we get a lot of questions on how an agency is to find out about hospitalization, for example, the first criteria that you see there. Or the injury severity with, HIPAA regulations. Sometimes the agency may learn by the person or the person's family that about the injured party and the severity of the injury, or if they were admitted to the hospital, especially if there is impending legal action. If not, FTA expects only a reasonable effort to attain this information. Continuing with the injury and exclusions, first aid administered at the scenes is excluded. That's not considered as an injury. Medical attention due to illnesses should not be reported. For example, a passenger on a train has a seizure and is transported to the hospital. Also, the exclusions regarding mental health evaluations that we've already discussed a couple times, declarations of self-harm, and transport solely for intoxication, overdoses, or exposure to the elements. Again, just like we covered in the SNS 50 section. The substantial damage threshold is defined as damage to any involved vehicles, facilities, equipment, rolling stock, or infrastructure that has disrupted the operations of the transit agency. So that's the first part of the criteria, to consider. It affected operations. The second part is that the event adversely affected the structural strength, performance, or operating characteristics of the object or vehicle, required towing, on-site rescue, on-site maintenance, or immediate removal prior to safe operation. The damage excludes, as you can see here, damage to cracked windows, dents, bent or small puncture holes in the body, broken lights, mirrors, or removal from service prior for minor repair or maintenance, testing, or video or event recorder download. And this refers to both the vehicles, the train and any vehicle that may be involved. Also excluded are personal property that might be in the vehicle that was damaged, such as laptops, cell phones, the cost of accident or criminal investigation, and also medical claims or litigation. You may have noticed that both the inclusions and the exclusions referred to on-site maintenance and removal from service, which can be confusing. Let me. Most agencies have policies to remove vehicles from service for post-accident inspections or evaluations. When applying the substantial damage threshold, consider both parts of the substantial damage criteria, that it includes damage to the vehicles and or objects and on-site maintenance or removal prior to service. The exclusions from service for minor repairs or maintenance does not refer to damage in this context. Removal from service due to post-accident inspections may be policy and is not necessarily due to damage. Regarding the towing portion of the substantial damage criteria, again, this does not pertain to towing the train, but rather it refers to towing another vehicle that may be involved in the collision due to disabling damage. For example, there's a mid-block collision with no injuries, no fatalities, yet the car is towed due to disabling damage. You would select the substantial damage option on setup screen 2. And then from the list, there will be 3 identifiers to choose from, whether it was just a transit property, to both transit and non-transit property, or just non-transit property. So then on the other vehicle form, you would also be sure to answer yes to the question, was this vehicle towed from the scene due to disabling damage as a result of the collision? And go ahead and cover it. Somebody asked us the other day in our non-rail class if that meant the other vehicle was towed due to a flat tire. And yes, that would be considered disabling damage if that flat tire was a result of the collision. However, if a car is just towed because the operator of that car is not there, that's obviously not being towed for disabling damage. All right. Rail transit vehicle collisions at a grade crossing or at a street intersection are automatically reportable regardless of any other threshold. This includes pedestrian crossings at stations and pedestrian crosswalks at intersections. Note the inclusion of the word intersection does not change the threshold. It is to support the new intersection location that was actually not new anymore. It was entered back or added back in 2022, but we'll cover that in more detail when we get into the collision information section. A collision between a rail transit vehicle and a person is also automatically reportable regardless of any injury or fatality. For example, if a pedestrian walks into the side of a moving train and is not injured, you report the collision with a person, but you do not include an injury form. Rail transit vehicle in this context also includes rail maintenance vehicles. As a reminder, as we mentioned earlier, if a person bumps into a train that is not moving, it is not reported as a slip, trip, and fall on the SNS 50 form. Rail-to-rail vehicle collisions are automatically reportable regardless, including any configuration of 2 or more revenue or non-revenue vehicles. Again, we reiterate that, for example, a collision between a flat car and a train would meet the rail-to-rail collision threshold. Also, that hand-powered rolling stock are not considered vehicles. So in this example, it would not be considered a rail-to-rail collision, but may still be reportable if it meets a threshold. The same would be true for a non-revenue vehicle colliding with a person or an object. This table is designed to show you how to report a rail-to-rail collision. Several reporters can easily get confused by how many trains we collect or how many other vehicles we collect. So this shows that if an event meets that the event automatically repeats the good golly, I can't talk. We have a column for automatically reportable rail to rail, number of trains involved, number of other vehicles involved. Okay, so when you create a rail collision report, the collision event form requires you to enter how many transit trains are involved and how many other vehicles are involved. Notice that if two trains collide, and I mean transit trains, revenue trains, it meets the rail-to-rail collision threshold, and you would include two revenue trains. However, if two maintenance vehicles collide, it meets the rail-to-rail collision threshold. However, you would not include any transit vehicles, but you would include two other vehicles. And in the last row, you see that when a work train or a maintenance vehicle collides with an object or a person or rail equipment, just as we just mentioned a moment ago, the event is still reportable as a rail collision, but a threshold such as injury or property damage must be met to be reportable. Agencies are required to report all derailments, both mainline and those occurring in the yard, regardless of meeting any other threshold. This includes derailments of trains in revenue or non-revenue service and maintenance vehicles. Cases where a wheel or wheels have left the rail and re-rail are included, and a derailment of any rail transit vehicle in service or not, which is part of a consist being pushed or pulled by powered track equipment, is included. The runaway train threshold applies only to revenue trains. A runaway, this includes both manned or unmanned trains, and runaway train events can be reported under three different categories. They can be reported as a collision, they can be reported as a derailment, or they can be reported as an other safety event. And I'm sorry, I noticed the chat box, not the chat box, the Q&A, or safety event section. Each one of these three forms has a place where you can mark that it was a one runaway train. Can everybody hear me? Somebody put, well, I guess that was a while ago. I
Oh, and
apologize.
that was from before.
Yeah, I see that now.
Yeah, everything's
see the
going well.
timing.
That's why I haven't popped in, so we're
It
good.
just popped up out of the corner of my eye, and I thought,
Oh,
and I
no,
didn't see
that's from
the-
before. We're good,
Okay.
thanks.
All right. Okay, so our next threshold is automatically reportable events are any evacuations for life safety situations or to the right of way. They're automatically reportable. Excuse me. If an evacuation for life safety means that there's imminent danger to people in that environment, and evacuations to the right of way, of course, are self-explanatory. They're putting people onto the track area. We do capture a self-evacuation flag, but please notice that the self-evacuation is not a type of evacuation. This is notating, this will be a side note, or a side checkbox, I should say, to already identifying that this is either a life safety evacuation or an evacuation to the right way. If they did happen to exit the vehicles by themselves without authority or direction of an official, then you would also check the self-evacuation flag. Some examples of life safety reasons might be a suspicious package, a bomb threat, bombing, of course, smoke event, fire, fuel fumes, noxious odors, etc. Evacuation may be due to mechanical or maintenance issues. For example, if a train loses power and the passengers are evacuated to the right of way, this may be reportable. However, passengers who are moved from one train, say to a rescue train directly without going onto the right of way or evacuated to a station platform are not considered evacuations to the right of way. As a reminder, to create a major event report, you navigate to the home menu and then choose the safety option for the safety button on the home screen, and then choose the correct reporting year. In this case, right now you see both 2024 and 2025 open. Unlike the SNS 50 forms, the SNS 40 forms do not automatically generate. So if there is a reportable event, you click on the button that says File New SNS 40 button, to actually get to that screen, you click on the pencil from the navigation screen. We didn't go over those, but you'll see those back in the navigation section when you look at your handout. And then there's a button there that says File New SNS 40, and you would click on that button, of course, to start your report creation. And just a reminder, SNS 40s are due 30 days from the date of the event. So unlike your non-majors, which are due by the end of the following month, SNS 40s are due within 30 days of the date of the event. Okay, I'm sorry. If you have an event to report that includes 2 or more of your transit modes from your agency, how would you report what mode to report under? We apply the predominant use rule, which is typically based on ridership. So if, for example, your event involved a train and a bus, for example, both from your agency, then you would report the event under the rail mode. If your event involves a streetcar and a light rail vehicle, you would report under, most likely, under the light rail mode, because typically it has more ridership. The first 2 screens to appear are Setup Screen 1 and Setup Screen 2. These 2 screens act as a wizard, if you will, and that may be an old term, but at any rate, act as a wizard in order to determine if the event is reportable. So the first screen, Setup Screen 2, is where you put in the date, you enter in the mode, and then you select the type of the event. This is an example of Setup Screen 1. As I said, the date, type of service, and then you check which event type it is. So let's talk about those event types that we briefly saw there. The first one in the list, and most common, is a collision. This includes a person that is intentionally pushed in front of a train and is struck. Excuse me, because that's an assault by way of collision. They were pushed in front of the train and struck. Also, similar suicides or attempted suicides would also be reported on the collision form, not on the security event form. The next option in the list would be derailments. This covers both mainline derailments and yard derailments. If the derailment is a result of a collision, so there was a collision first and then the car train derailed, then you would report the event as a collision and enter the number of cars that derailed on the appropriate form. The next option to appear is a fire. Then we have acts of God, hazmat spills, other safety events. And these, again, are those miscellaneous events that meet a major event threshold, similar to our other safety events on the non-major, but of course, these would meet a major event threshold. We also have security events, the last 2 selections on that Setup Screen 1. We have system security events that such as arson, bomb threats, burglaries, suspicious package items, vandalism, so on. So these are basically events that affect the transit system as a whole. The second are security personal security events such as assault, robbery, homicide, attempted suicide, etc., that affect 1 or more individuals. Just as with other event types, the event must meet a reporting threshold. Suicides or attempted suicides that are not a result of collisions are reported on this form. The second Setup Screen 2, asks you a series of questions. These are designed to determine if the event is reportable or not, or potentially not reportable as a major event. This is only a list, and we're going to cover each one of these thresholds in more detail as we go along. These are mostly threshold questions at this point. The first is the number of injuries. So it asks you the number of injuries and you enter the amount. Next is the substantial damage indicator, where you're going to indicate if there was or was not substantial damage. And if so, there was substantial damage, then the type of substantial damage. As I mentioned earlier, whether it's to all the vehicles, just the rail, just the non-rail, etc. And then finally, it asks about the evacuation, not finally, but excuse me. It also asks about the evacuation threshold to determine if there was an evacuation for life safety or to the rail right-of-way. If you are reporting a collision report, you're going to get 4 additional questions to answer. So the first would be if transit revenue vehicles or non-revenue rail transit vehicles were involved in the event, if the event was at a collision, if the collision was at a grade crossing or at an intersection, again, thresholds, was the event with a rail vehicle or a person, again, another threshold, and did this involve a runaway train, again, a threshold. All right, so this is an example of the setup screen 2 for a collision report. Again, you see the boxes for 1 or more fatalities, 1 or more serious injuries, or serious injuries, or either no fatalities or injuries. Your substantial damage, and if you check this, then you'd get the subsections would appear, or you could choose no substantial damage, and then the threshold questions that we just talked about. I'm sorry, somebody's asked a question, and since I know that James doesn't seem to be in still, I'm just going to go ahead and answer this question. The person asked if a train has a service interruption, like a trespasser strike or vehicle strike, and passengers are evacuated to the right-of-way because of the time it will take to restore service, is this reportable? Yes. If you've evacuated the people to the right-of-way, we're not talking about a life safety situation there, but you've evacuated them onto the alignment, then yes, that's reportable as a major event. Okay. All right. So regarding the question, were transit revenue vehicles or non-revenue rail transit vehicles involved in this event? Answering no to this question would create a non-transit collision form, which must meet a reporting threshold, as we've talked about. And these examples that are presented here are the same as were presented a little bit earlier. The non-transit collision form appears very differently than the regular collision forms. So if you see this form and you are trying to report a rail collision, for instance, with a person or something, you definitely have the wrong form. So you would want to delete this at that point and then continue on. But this is what the non-transit form would look like. And most often they're used for example, as you can see with the options here, for instance, you're in your park and ride lot, a vehicle hits a person and that person's transported for medical attention. That would be one example. All right. So continuing on our setup screen to collect selections. Once you've answered all those questions, the next screen to appear is the basic information screen. If the event is not reportable as a major event, the system will generate a message that it says it's not reportable, or it may be reportable on the SNS 50. It just depends on what's been chosen, what's been answered yes and no to. And so that would give you an opportunity to review your answers that you did on setup screen 2, and then either move to, make a change and go on, or perhaps let it go and start all over again. All right. So the basic information screen. This is probably the most important screen you have to fill out. So if the event meets that criteria, this form appears, and the date that you already entered in on setup screen 1 will come in there, and then you indicate the time, and you can also report the geographic coordinates. You enter in the approximate address. You can search by address. You can search by lat long for your longitude and latitude sections to be completed. And you also can use your approximate address field. Like I said, you can type in your own address and let the system find the coordinates for you. The description, the event description, and again, this is definitely the most important thing. We don't know what happened in your event, only you do. So whatever you tell us is how we're going to validate your report. You want to be sure that you enter a in the 2000, it is a 2000 character box. And if you do exceed that box, it's going to pop up and say that you've exceeded the limit. And it's not going to let you continue until you shorten your narrative. The description should be, as we've mentioned in other areas, to be concise and descriptive, and so that the analyst can understand what occurred, how it occurred, if any vehicles were towed, if there were any injuries or fatalities, and who these people were. Were they in the car? Were they in the bus? Or not bus? Were they in the train, etc.? So it should be complete and have all of your details. And then here's an example down in the bottom in the italics of a short but sweet description that tells us everything we need to know. And if the description is not clear, or we can't understand what happened, we will return the report for clarity in the description. All right, in your description, one thing you don't want to include is PII. So no personal identification information, addresses, names, badge numbers, operator names, operator driver's licenses, any of that. Do not include those. However, you can include the age and sex of the person. The basic information screen includes event boxes for attempted suicide and suicide, and when the event is a collision, as we mentioned earlier, and this will be corroborated by box on a similar checkbox on your injury or fatality form accordingly. And this is also the first screen to appear that shows you a progress bar at the top, which I'll show you here on the next screen. So this blue bar at the top is showing you how far along you are in your report creation. So at this point, as you can see, we're on the basic information screen. Okay, once we've completed the basic information screen, the collision screens, again, I'm sorry, the assaults are resulting in a collision, we talked about this earlier, are also reported as a collision. So if someone's pushed in front of a train, as terrible as that sounds, but unfortunately it happens, these are reported as a collision now ever since 2022. And there's a place to mark that there was an assault. Okay, so in completing your collision forms, there are 4 collision forms that appear when you, based on your selections on that setup screen too. So that's the collision event information form, the collision information form, the transit vehicle involved form, and if applicable, the other vehicle involved form. So this is a snapshot of the collision information screen. All right, so we're going to go through all these data points directly. The first is, again, the collision event screen. This one captures the number of trains involved in the event. You would always answer 1 unless 2 trains from your agency collide. There are several locations, including a revenue facility transit station, non-revenue facilities, which would include maintenance yards, maintenance buildings, train wash sites, so on. These would be your non-revenue facilities. And then there's not a right-of-way, not a grade crossing, which would be things that happen, at a parking lot entrance or a driveway entrance, for example. And continue on with the locations, your right-of-way grade crossing has been clarified to mean that an intersection where a road and a transit exclusive rail right-of-way cross each other at the same level at grade. It's most common in light rail and hybrid rail mode systems. Next option is the right-of-way intersection selection. This should now be used to capture collisions at an intersection or crossroads where street running rail crosses in mixed traffic. This selection would be primarily used for streetcar and cable car systems, though there are exceptions. Both the grade crossing and intersection locations include pedestrian crosswalks and exclude driveways and parking lot entrances. However, there are many configurations and positions of crosswalks, so you may have questions about the location, and if you do, please feel free to contact us. The service stop location is where passengers are board and alight the transit vehicle, typically on a transit street, at the curb, or in a median, and sometimes with a shelter, sign, or lighting. So these are not revenue facilities. These are service stops on your form. The revenue facility that we already mentioned earlier, transit station, location would be used for stops in actual buildings that may include ticket machines, restrooms, stairs, elevators, escalators, and so on. So for visual reference, here's some examples to determine the location. The first two images here are typical grade crossing presentations. And you'll notice in the second image that the rail alignment in this case is in the median and has curbs on both sides to separate it from the vehicles. The intersection location shows an image of street running operations where the streetcar is crossing over the roadway intersection in mixed traffic. Again, in the mixed traffic scenario, the cars can drive on the tracks. They can be in the same lane as the transit vehicle. Then you see a typical revenue facility down on the lower left, and then a service stop where you see it's just like a small little covering so they don't get wet kind of a thing with a post that there's a stop there. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just saying another question. So this says, does a private vehicle auto reversing into a stopped train in an intersection count as a major collision? Yes, it's automatically reportable because collisions in intersections are automatically reportable. Okay, now we're going to move on to the collision with selection. Excuse me. So this is where you're going to indicate what the train collided with, or what collided with the train, as it were. A collision with a person-powered bicycle, pedicab, or a person in a wheelchair is going to be reported as a collision with a person. However, motorized bicycles, scooters, mopeds, tour buses, school buses, box trucks, dump trucks, so on and so forth, are going to be reported as a non-transit motor vehicle, a collision with a non-transit motor vehicle. The other selection would only be used when no other selection is appropriate. In a multiple impact collision, report the collision with as the first object that was impacted. A collision with a transit vehicle is used when two transit revenue vehicles from your agency collide. The two options shown here refer to revenue trains colliding. If two non-revenue trains collide, you would choose the option referring to non-revenue trains. Not in, I guess it's not shown here. Apologize. In a multiple collision scenario, you report the collision with as the first object or vehicle that was impacted. For example, if a train collides with a car and then the car goes on and hits a building or a pole, the collision with section would be non-transit motor vehicle, because that was the first thing that was hit. And then you would also include the damages to the building or the pole or whatever else was struck in the event description. And that would be factoring in as part of your property damage as well. Let's look at a few examples of how to determine how many other vehicles to report. As we showed in the table earlier, when two non-revenue maintenance vehicles collide, you do not include a transit revenue vehicle, but include two other vehicles instead to generate the correct forms. Also, in multiple vehicle collisions, if car 1 cuts off an LRV, but no contact is made, and the LRV goes on to hit the car, then the number of other vehicles to report is 1 because only car 2 had contact. If car 1 and car 2 hits car 2, and then car 2 proceeds on to hit the LRV, the number of other vehicles to report is 2, since both car 1 and car 2 had contact with each other before they had contact with the transit vehicle. Just as a reminder, please do not include the total number of vehicles involved. We're only talking about the non-transit vehicles in this case. Okay, so this is an example of the next screen to appear, which would be your collision information form. This is the top portion of the form because this is a very long form. And again, we're going to talk about each section. And then this is the second section where you're identifying the rail alignment, crossing control devices based on what's selected, right-of-way conditions also. All right, so let's talk about these options. So the first thing is that the collision information captures is conditions at the scene, such as weather and lighting at the time of the vision. The twilight selection is used to refer to both dawn and dusk when it's not full light or full dark. Please be sure your lighting corroborates the AM and PM time you entered on the basic information screen. Indoors is not used to indicate street lights or lights at a station platform. The condition of the roadway is also collected, such as if it's wet, dry, icy, so on. Under the rail alignment section, we want to look at two of the options. The first is the semi-exclusive right-of-way with controlled grade crossings for vehicular and or pedestrian traffic. Again, we shared that we've changed this to the actual definition of semi-exclusive just to make it much clearer and to include, since it also includes the fact that this refers to places where it also includes grade crossings and controlled accesses. It's just much clearer than the old shared with other vehicle options. The second is non-exclusive right-of-way shared with vehicles or pedestrians, which would be selected when the rail alignment consists of rail tracks that are embedded in the street and cars can drive over them and pedestrians can walk across them in the same area as the transit vehicle travels. Neither of these options would be selected if the mode is heavy rail, since heavy rail alignment would always be, unless there's alignments out there I'm not aware of, exclusive, except for two specific agencies, the two that I'm aware of. Intersection, grade crossing, and service stop control devices now appear accordingly based on the location. So at this point, we've finished the collision information form. The next screen to appear would be the rail transit train involved form. So this form collects the information about the number of trains, the actions of the trains, speed, and so forth. There's also an identifier count if you do have more than one train involved so that you can identify the difference between train 1 and train 2. And you will also notice on that form that there are add and delete buttons for adding in extra vehicles or deleting vehicles if you accidentally typed in too many. So this is an example of the transit train involved form. And again, we're going to talk about all of these in more detail as we proceed through. There's a tooltip right here. This is new. It's not going to show it to me yet. No, it's not going to show it to me here. But this is a tooltip to help you define your collision types. Okay. All right. So again, this captures information about the train that's involved, how many cars are in the consist, how many trains are involved and how many cars in the consist. If any of the cars derailed, it also captures the vehicle action at the time of the collision, the train action, I should say, the collision type, which is the part of the train that was impacted, the vehicle speed, and finally, if a runaway train was involved. The fleet involved section now integrates with your agency's most recently saved A30 revenue vehicle inventory form. There is a separate A30 form for each mode and type of service. With this integration, you will choose a vehicle from the list of available options for that mode. Again, this is completed in the annual forms typically by the annual, the person that does the annual reporting for your agency. So you choose the list from options. When the selection's made, the vehicle manufacturer and the fuel type are already part of the selection, thus eliminating the any incorrect entries that you might make on your own. So it automatically pulls in the data. If you're operating a new manufacturer that is not in your A30, you will have an option to add the vehicle to the form. There'll be a button for it. You'll see it momentarily. However, if you are adding it, it does not update the A30 itself. So anything you populate there is not updating the A30. If you do have questions about your A30, again, please contact the person that submits the annual reporting forms for your agency. So this is what we're talking about. This is a screenshot after clicking the existing fleet button. So it comes up and it shows you these RVI IDs, the total vehicles in that fleet. This field right here is filled out by the reporter that's completing these forms. They may put in train numbers here. They may put in the year there. They can do it however they wish. But at any rate, all these data points come up and it completes these boxes for you once you make the selection, and then you click on Add Fleet. Okay. If the vehicle is not in the fleet, as I just mentioned, either due to it's a new vehicle or just the timing of when the annual reports are done, you may add the fleet in by clicking on New Fleet. When you do that, you're going to get a drop down to choose the vehicle type from a list, the vehicle manufacturer from a list, there again, and then the fuel types from a list. And once you've made those selections, then you would click on the Add Fleet button. And if we see it, quite honestly, we may question you about it. If we see it in an A30 and you don't see it, then we may question about that fleet. Okay, so this is a screenshot after clicking the Add Fleet button. And as I mentioned, you're going to see the RVID that was selected, chosen, and it automatically populates these other fields for you. Okay, let's go on. All right, so also the form captures, as mentioned, the number of cars in the train consist and the number of cars that derailed, if any. The vehicle action at the time of the collision, was it stopped, was it turning, etc. The vehicle type, collision type, this is the part of the train that was struck. Was it the front, was it the side, was it the top? Wherever, there's several options for you to choose from. And here you see these shown. Lots of people get confused about other front impact and head-on and rear ending and all of that. Again, there is a tooltip now that will show this exact same image when you click on it. This is reported from the point of view of the transit vehicle. Okay, so other front impact and other rear impact. These are not the same as rear-ended or rear-ending. These are used when the front or rear of the transit vehicle is impacted, but not when it would be considered a head-on or rear-ended situation. It's mostly the corner, as you saw, just backing up one. We're talking about this. This is the front, other front impact, not this on the side. This is the front. Okay. Okay. And then if you do report one vehicle as rear-ended and one vehicle as rear-ending, these are always reported as a pair. So there's never going to be a time when you're going to say other front impact and rear-ended. We're going to send it back, just to let you know. Always report those as a pair. Okay, chain reactions. Sometimes these can be a challenge to report. Please remember to consider the first impact or collision type in your analysis. So in this diagram, vehicle 1 would be, this is the transit vehicle. Vehicle 1 be reported as rear-ending since it did the hitting, and it subsequently rear-ended this vehicle. Then the second vehicle was pushed forward and it rear-ended this vehicle. So we have rear-ending, rear-ended, and rear-ended. All right, the speed. So you enter in the speed at the time of the collision, including if it's 0, which of course would have to match to either a parked or stopped location. And then the last question is referring to if a runaway train was involved. And if you do say yes, then it's going to ask you if the operator was in the vehicle or not. All right, so moving on to the other vehicle that could be involved in the collision. If you indicated 1 up on the former forms, then the other vehicle form will be generated. If more than one other vehicle was involved, you will need to complete the other vehicle involved information form for each motor vehicle involved. Vehicle counts are included on the form to help you keep track of them, and also options for adding or removing an additional vehicle. As noted earlier, when reporting collisions that involve a non-revenue maintenance vehicle, excuse me, we now have a selection on the other vehicle form that says non-revenue rail vehicle maintenance. So you would choose that instead of choosing other or any other selection. This is the other vehicle involved screen. And again, we'll go through each of these options momentarily. Okay, so first thing that you see is the other vehicle involved information. So you indicate when you're reporting a collision, the other vehicle screen has a selection for commercial rail or Amtrak vehicle. The automobile option would be used for both cars and passenger vans, like a Dodge Caravan, for example, and the action or physical movement of the other vehicle at the time of the collision. Just like when you're reporting a transit vehicle type, you are indicating the part of the vehicle that was hit from the point of view of the other vehicle. Also, make sure that you answer yes to the question accordingly. Was the vehicle towed from the scene due to disabling damage as a result of the collision? If the vehicle was towed because the person wanted the vehicle to be towed, or they were intoxicated, or they were transported away from the scene, then that would not be a tow away for disabling damage. I see I'm on the wrong form. I'm sorry. Apologize here. This was the screen I was talking about. I apologize. All right, quickly, let's go over. I know we're apparently over time. I don't know how that happened, but at any rate, I'm just going to go through the injury section here, and then we'll see about how we're going to address the overtime here. If your event does include an injury or fatality, you will need to complete one screen for each person. Again, these forms include person count and buttons for increasing or decreasing the number of people. Person location categories are divided into 2 groups: persons outside the vehicle and person inside the vehicle. So be sure to choose carefully. We often see collision reports where the transit vehicle operator is reported as being outside of the vehicle because that's the first transit vehicle operator selection you see. So make sure you pay attention to those inside and outside categories. Transit vehicle rider is a correct choice for passengers who are boarding or alighting, or for people that are train surfing or riding between the cars. And finally, again, I think I'm not on the right screen. There we go. Apologize. A pedestrian walking along the road also includes walking along the tracks. It's synonymous with both. Pedestrian other is the best choice for when people are sitting, standing, or laying on the tracks. The injury form includes selections for the nature of the injury, such as serious or non-serious, and there's a checkbox to indicate if the person was transit. transported. Remember, if a person is seriously injured, that does not mean that they were necessarily transported away from the scene for medical attention. For collisions, the injury and fatality forms include attempted suicide and respective suicide buttons accordingly, as we talked about a little bit earlier. It's also been modified to include a box for assaults on the same section. Okay, the trespasser checkbox has 3 buttons now too. A response is required here. It does not default like the assault button does to no assault or attempted suicide accordingly. And then so you must make a selection for the trespasser, and the insufficient information section is used only when there's no corroborating data to confirm that this act was intentional or not, and this should be addressed in the event description. Trespassers are people in unauthorized areas, typically facilities. Just as with attempted suicide, if there are police reports, eyewitness statements, etc., to account for the trespassing, please include that in the event description. All the information you give us is helpful. A few more things about the trespasser. Trespassing events are not reported on the event level, and trespassing is not a threshold. Rather, we collect trespasser injuries and fatalities. And then here's a few examples of when determining trespassing when you're reviewing your data. It's also helpful if you can put the word trespasser or trespassing in the event description to help us validate that data point. So this is an example of the fatality form, your inside and outside locations, age range, sex, suicide, not suicide, so on, and your trespasser boxes. The injury forms are very similar, except that you have the injury type, and this is where one would choose that it's serious or non-serious. The rest of the options are the same. Okay, whoops, I'm sorry. All right, Lori?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't know how we are this far over. Shall I continue on with the next section?
Yes, I'm going to say yes. If people need to drop off, please, by all means, but because the recording is going, it will be in its complete form on our YouTube page when I post it. So if you're available, let's keep going. And anyone who has to drop off, I will add it to our YouTube page. I'll put the link in the chat so you'll have it.
I will try and go through kind of quickly. I mean, the slides pretty much say everything, but if I feel there's really something pertinent that I can add to that, I will. And anybody that has to drop off and doesn't getting any questions answered, please feel free to chat me or email me afterwards, and or call me, whatever. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Great. Yeah, there's a couple of questions, but go.
Take over this section. I'm not sure what happened. I was booted from the Zoom earlier. If you'd like me to continue on, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay, James. Yeah, if you want to take it, that'd be great. Now I'll pop into the other meeting I'm supposed to be in.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
all right.
Sorry. Thanks,
Yeah.
Anne.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right. So earlier, wrong screen. Okay. Earlier, we discussed evacuations. Evacuations can be included in any event type, but are less common in collisions. If any evacuation is incorrectly included or excluded, you cannot add or delete it from a report. The entire report would need to be deleted and a new report entered with or without the evacuation. This is a screenshot of the evacuation subform. The first question on the evacuation event screen is to confirm that the evacuation was for life safety, to the rail, right-of-way, and if either of those evacuations was a self-evacuation, you may select as many options as needed. The what was evacuated question is used to indicate what was actually evacuated. One choice would be vehicle or vessel, which would mean the train. Do not report the location of the train at the time of the evacuation. Once the evacuation subform is generated, in a report, it cannot be deleted. So if an evacuation is incorrectly included, the entire report would need to be deleted, and a new report entered without the evacuation. Similarly, you cannot add an evacuation subform to a report. Derailments are automatically reportable except for Commuter Rail or Alaska Railway, as they report only security events. All derailments of transit trains on mainline track or in the yard are reported even if the train is not in revenue service and regardless of any other major threshold. Again, derailments include situations where the wheels leave the track and then re-rail. Maintenance equipment such as high rail vehicle derailments are also automatically reportable. Please be sure to select one rail transit vehicle involved, even though this generates the train form. Also, on the train involved form, select new fleet, and in the vehicle type selection, choose non-revenue rail vehicle maintenance instead of other as you used to do. Reminder, derailments resulting from a collision are reported as collisions, not a derailment. We have already discussed the new engineering and construction phase exclusion, which also applies to derailments. And as a reminder, transit-related activities includes operations, testing, simulated service or pre-revenue service, or a transit-related maintenance activity. The second exclusion states that a split switch is not considered a derailment, and the last excludes derailments of hand-powered equipment as they are not considered vehicles. This is a screenshot of the derailment form. As you can see, the form collects the type of derailment, where the derailment occurred, the number of trains involved, the location of the derailment, and the right-of-way configuration. This is a screenshot of the derailment rail transit details form, which is much like the collision information screen, collecting lighting, alignment, and conditions. This is a screenshot of the derailment rail transit train involved form. Regarding the fleet selection, if this is a derailment of a high rail or other maintenance vehicle, choose the new fleet button, and for the vehicle type, please use the new non-revenue rail vehicle maintenance selection instead of the other selection. Notice the same integration of the A30 form, which is completed just as we discussed under the collision section. The form also collects information about the train involved, including if the derailment was due to a runaway train. Reporting fires on the SNS 40 that meet one or more major event thresholds. To be defined as a fire on the SNS 40 form, the incident must have had fire suppression, equipment, or personnel involved to contain the fire, and the fire must meet a major event threshold. Without these thresholds, a fire requiring suppression is reported on the SNS 50 non-major summary report. Arson is reported on screen 1 as a system security event, not a fire. The presence of smoke only is reported as an other safety event. This is a screenshot of the fire event details screen. If the fire is in or on the rail vehicle, including in the engine, wheel area, or anywhere on the outside, this would be reported as in or on vehicle. Report the type or cause of the fire. For the fuel type selection, if you chose the location of the fire as in or on vehicle, then you would report the fuel type of the vehicle. Acts of God are natural and unavoidable catastrophes that affect the transit environment. Select all locations of property damage, injuries, fatalities, and evacuations. You will be able to choose more than one option. For example, the location should indicate the property or properties that were damaged and not the geographic location, such as the name of the city. This is the screenshot of the Act of God screen. When reporting hazardous material spills, the spill must meet a reportable threshold and have caused imminent danger to life, health, or environment, and required specialized cleanup. A couple of examples of incidents not reportable as a hazmat event include oil, brake fluid, etc., from a transit vehicle as there is not enough fluid to meet a threshold. A bleach container carried onto a vehicle breaks open and the vehicle is evacuated due to fumes. This is reported as other safety event because no specialized cleanup was used. This is a screenshot of the hazardous material spill screen. You can see that you report the location of the spill and the type of material spilled. There are two categories of security events on screen 1. System security or personal security events, which must meet one or more of the following thresholds. System security events occur on transit property and affect the transit system as a whole. Personal security events happen to individuals on transit property or those boarding or alighting a transit vehicle. This is where you would report suicides or attempted suicides that did not involve impact with a transit vehicle. As a reminder, a confrontational assault and robbery at the same time and place are reported as a robbery. This table serves as a recap of changes made to collecting assaults on transit workers in 2023. The term transit worker was changed to include volunteers rather than use the existing definition of a transit employee. The next row provides the definition of assault on a transit worker. As you see, this is a circumstance in which an individual knowingly, without lawful authority or permission, and with intent to endanger the safety of any individual, or with reckless disregard for the safety of human life, interferes with, disables, or incapacitates a transit worker, while the transit worker is performing the duties of the transit worker. The assault on a transit worker definition is more defined than the assault definition in the next row. The term assault now applies only to non-worker assaults or off-duty personnel. The homicide definition is unchanged. Homicide is relative to assaults, and that any assault resulting in a fatality under the circumstances shown is reported in NTD as a homicide. We will collect the same information and use the same forms for worker assaults, non-worker assaults, and homicides. Again, there are two terms used to collect the assault type. These terms classify the assault as physical or non-physical. In a physical assault, the assailant makes physical contact with the worker or may use an object, weapon, or projectile to do so. Projectiles may include bullets, any liquids, the assailant's saliva, or any other substance. In non-physical assaults, there is no physical contact with the worker. Non-physical assaults could include verbal threats, harassment, or interference with a worker's duties. For example, interference with the operator's ability to continue service by refusing to get off the vehicle when asked. If either assault or homicide is selected as the event type, then a subsection will appear for additional information on who was assaulted or killed. The first two selections are for operators and workers. The last selection, assault homicide not against transit worker, would be used to report assaults against passengers or patrons. To assist in reporting or determining how to report, we're providing several examples, as you can see here on the screen. In the third scenario here, we have an event where a transit worker and a patron were both assaulted. However, only the patron was transported. So far in this presentation, we have learned that if the officer is not transported, the event is reported as a non-major event. However, the assault on the patron is also a reportable event. This one event cannot be split up as two separate events. Therefore, one major report is created as an assault on a transit worker, and the injury included represents the patron. This is a screenshot of the system security event screen. You may notice that there is an other system security event option on this form. This would be to capture security events that do not meet any other category. For example, shots fired, at, or objects thrown at a vehicle. This is a screenshot of the personal security event screen. You will notice that there is an other personal security event option for events that do not fit into other categories, such as when a person is transported due to being tased by police. This is a screenshot of both subsections if assault homicide is chosen, and the assault or homicide is against a transit operator or transit worker. The final major event type is other safety events. This is your miscellaneous category. These events must meet one of the following thresholds: one or more fatalities, two or more injured, either serious or non-serious, substantial damage, an evacuation, or involved a runaway train. Please note, you may report an other safety event with one injury if another threshold is met. Here are some examples. An evacuation of transit property due to smoke, fumes, noxious odors. Any fatality on transit property that is not considered a collision or suicide, such as a fall or electrocution. 2 people are thrown from their seats due to a hard brake. 3 people injured when an escalator comes to an abrupt stop. Other safety events resulting in only a single injury are reported on the SNS 50 monthly summary form. This is a screenshot of the other safety event screen. So at this point, we have completed all of our screens for the reportable event types. We'll now review saving, submitting, and editing. At any point from the basic information screen on, the system automatically saves your report. So if you close the report without saving or submitting, from this point on, these auto-saved reports become pending reports, which are stored as a task on the task menu option. When you are ready to complete the report, click on the task menu option, and you will see a listing of each task. Major event report tasks will appear with SNS 40 in the title. Just click on the task and the system will return you to the screen you were on when you closed the report. Complete the report and save and submit. Or if you no longer need the report, you can choose delete instead. Save and submit options appear when you are in the view form mode. If you do not see a save or submit button, click on the view form button and scroll to the bottom. Once you click on save, the report is saved and is given an event number located at the top of the report. The report stays open so you may review it. When you submit a report, the report will close the report and return you to the dashboard. Submitting the report releases the report to the validation analyst for review and comment. It also notifies the analyst that a report has been created or edited. Please note that unsubmitted reports are excluded from the event, injury, and fatality counts in the SNS 20 CEO certification form. Analysts may return a report to you for questions or to make corrections. The system will send the last modified user one email for each report that is returned. After you make corrections, be sure to save and submit. When reviewing or editing your reports, it is important to learn how to move around the document. Here's a list of the available button tools, though each button may not be available on every form. One shortcut I would like to point out is the Edit section buttons. These buttons allow you to jump to a specific screen instead of using the next or back buttons. There are several resources available for further information on assaults on transit workers. These resources are continued on the next slide and include guidance for NTD reporting, as well as an informational presentation by TSO, which covers assaults on transit workers, initiatives, and how NTD data collection ties into tracking progress towards the risk reduction program. Both the Safety and Security Policy Manual and NTD FAQ page have been updated to include information about assaults on transit workers. There's also an FAQ page for the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan Final Rule. That concludes the presentation. Please feel free to reach out to your safety analyst for any questions you may have, or if you prefer to ask questions in a one-on-one session. If you are unsure of who your safety analyst is, please feel free to contact any of us. However, please feel free to stay connected as we are going. While we may not be continuing to address any questions as we've run out of time.
Thank you, James. Thank you, anyone who's still here. There's quite a lot of you, actually. Thank you for staying. We did go over. I will do a light edit and post the recording on NTI's YouTube page. I realize I forgot to put the link for that in the chat, but you can find the link on the NTI website, or you could just email me and ask. Otherwise, you'll get a survey. Please complete it. And I guess everyone have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Thanks, James, Olivia.